For 8 years, I bought the story of my parents' poverty with monthly transfers and exhausting guilt. I paid their electric bills because I couldn't stand hearing my mother cry. But the truth arrived in a misdelivered envelope holding a receipt for $500 from a restaurant they claimed they could never afford. It turned out they weren't broke. They were just dining on my loyalty, one expensive meal at a time. The vibration of my phone on the granite countertop was not a sound. It was a physical sensation that traveled through the cheap laminate flooring of my kitchen, up my spine, and settled as a dull ache behind my eyes. It was 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had just walked through the door of my condo in Lake Haven, dropped my laptop bag on the chair, and exhaled for the first time in 10 hours. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. The timing was too precise. I had just been paid that morning. I stared at the phone, watching it buzz against the ceramic fruit bowl. My condo was quiet, the kind of quiet I paid for with 60-hour weeks at the consultancy firm where I managed client expectations and smoothed over corporate panic. I was 33 years old. I had a title, a modest mortgage, and a persistent, low-grade exhaustion that felt like I was walking underwater. I picked up the phone. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Sarah?" Her voice was thin, tremulous. It was the voice of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. Looking down, it was a voice I had been trained to respond to since I was old enough to understand the concept of money. "Is everything okay?" I asked. Though I knew the answer, "I am so sorry to bother you." "Honey," she said, "I know you are busy. I told your father not to call. I told him we could figure it out. But the light on the dashboard came on again, the check engine light, and the mechanic said it is the transmission fluid, or maybe the pump. I do not understand these things. He said it is unsafe to drive." I closed my eyes. I leaned my hip against the counter and rubbed my temple. "How much is it?" "Mom, it is $350, she whispered. "We just do not have it. Sarah, the pension check does not come until next week, and we had to pay for your father's prescription refill yesterday, that one for his blood pressure. It was more than we thought." There it was. The logic, the sequence of unfortunate events that always led to a gap of exactly $300 or $400. It was never 1,000. It was never 50. It was always an amount that hurt, but was survivable. An amount I could transfer if I skipped my own contribution to my retirement fund, or decided not to get my car detailed, or ate pasta for 2 weeks. "I can send it," I said. "Oh, honey, no, I feel terrible," she said. "It is fine. Mom, I do not want Dad driving an unsafe car. I will pay you back," she said. "As soon as the check clears. I promise. Do not worry about it." I said. I hung up and opened my banking app. My thumb moved automatically. A muscle memory carved over 8 years of crises. Select account. Transfer funds. $350. Confirm. I watched the balance on my savings account drop. It was a number that never seemed to grow. Every time I managed to push it over $5,000, a water heater broke in Westbrook Ridge, or a tooth cracked, or a tax bill arrived that they had somehow forgotten. I told myself it was love. I told myself that this was what families did. They held each other up. My parents had raised me, fed me, clothed me. They were good people who had just hit a streak of bad luck that had lasted nearly a decade. That was the narrative. It was the only one I allowed myself to have. The next day, I met Tessa for lunch at a salad place near our office complex. Tessa Marlowe had been my best friend since college. She was a project manager with a sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, the kind of person who color-coded her calendar and did not suffer fools. "You look tired," she said, stabbing a cherry tomato. "I am fine," I said. "Just a long week. It is Wednesday. Sarah, Mom called last night." I said, "Car trouble." Tessa paused. She lowered her fork. "Again?" she asked. "Didn't they just have car trouble 2 months ago? The alternator?" "This was the transmission," I said, "or the pump, something like that." "And how much was it?" $350. Tessa chewed slowly, her eyes fixed on my face. She swallowed and took a sip of her iced tea before speaking. Sarah, she said, do you ever see the bill? What? The invoice from the mechanic, she said, or the quote. Do they ever send you a picture of it? Why would they send me a picture? I asked. I am not an insurance adjuster. They are my parents. I know. Tessa said. I am just saying. It is very frequent, and the amounts are always convenient. They are struggling. Tessa, the economy has been hard on them. Dad's pension is not what it used to be. Tessa sighed. She reached across the table and touched my hand. I am not trying to be mean, she said. I just hate seeing you like this. You make good money. Sarah, you should be traveling. You should be buying a new couch to replace that beige thing you hate. Instead, you are acting like a safety net for two grown adults who seem to have a crisis every time you get a paycheck. They would never lie about something like that. I said. My voice was sharper than I intended. It is humiliating for them to ask. I can hear it in Mom's voice. She cries. Tessa. She hates asking. Okay, Tessa said, retreating. Okay, I am sorry. I just worry about you. I finished my salad in silence, feeling a mix of defensiveness and shame. I knew Tessa meant well, but she did not understand the dynamics of my family. She did not understand the way my mother's voice could crumble, the way my father would sit in silent, heavy embarrassment while I wrote the check. They were not con artists. They were my parents. The cracks in the world usually happen when you are looking at something else. It was 2 weeks later. The season was turning, the heavy Illinois humidity breaking into a crisp, windy autumn. I arrived home to find a stack of mail jammed into my box in the lobby. I grabbed the bundle and walked up the 2 flights of stairs to my unit. I sorted through it at the kitchen island. Junk, bill, junk, coupon flyer. Then I stopped. There was a cream-colored envelope, slightly thicker than standard stationery. The return address was blank, but the postmark was from Briar Glen, a wealthy suburb about 40 minutes north of Lake Haven. The addressee was Mr. and Mrs. H. Collins, but the address was mine. I frowned. My parents had used a post office box in Westbrook Ridge for years. They sometimes used my address for packages because they worried about theft on their porch, but never for mail like this, and they had never gone by H. Collins on anything official. I flipped it over. It was sealed with a simple adhesive strip, already peeling slightly at the corner. I assumed it was an invitation, maybe a wedding of a distant cousin who had confused our addresses, or perhaps a solicitation for insurance. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. Inside was not a card. It was a receipt. It was a thermal printout, clipped inside a small, dark cardstock folder stamped with a gold logo. The Ember Room. I stared at the logo. I knew the name. The Ember Room was a steakhouse in Briar Glen that had won awards for its wine list. It was the kind of place where you needed a reservation 3 weeks in advance and a jacket for the dining room. I pulled the receipt out. Date: October 14th. Time: 7:42 p.m. Guests: 4. I scanned down the list of items. 2 ribeye steaks, 1 sea bass, 1 rack of lamb, 3 bottles of sparkling water, 2 bottles of Cabernet, dessert sampler. The subtotal was $412, with tax and the 20% gratuity included. The total came to $524.42. I blinked. I read the numbers again. $500. My parents had called me 3 days before this date. October 11th. My mother had been in tears because their water heater had leaked, and they needed $200 for a plumber to patch it. I had sent the money. I looked at the bottom of the receipt. There was a signature line. The signature was a scrawl, barely legible, but the last name loop was familiar. And then, clipped to the receipt, there was a small, handwritten note on thick cardstock. The handwriting was elegant, looped and precise. Same time next month. Your table is perfect. I stood in my kitchen, the refrigerator humming behind me, holding the piece of paper. My brain, trained to solve problems and find logical patterns, immediately began to reject what I was seeing. This was not theirs. It had to be a mistake. H. Collins could be anyone. Harry Collins, Hank Collins. There were probably a dozen Collins families in the Tri-County area, but the address was mine. Why was it sent to my address? Maybe my dad had forwarded his mail here? No. I would have seen other things. Maybe it was a gift? Maybe someone had taken them out for a special anniversary dinner? I looked at the date again. October 14th. Their anniversary was in June. Maybe it was a business meeting? My father had been a mid-level manager at a logistics firm before he retired. He still did some consulting now and then, or so he said, but he had told me he had not had a contract in 6 months. That was why they were so tight on money. And if someone else had paid, why did they have the receipt? The receipt goes to the person who pays. I looked at the signature again. I walked over to the drawer where I kept my files and pulled out a birthday card my father had sent me last year. I held the card next to the receipt. The loop of the C, the sharp, jagged line of the S at the end. The air in my condo suddenly felt very thin. I sat down on the bar stool. I put the receipt on the counter and smoothed it out with my hand. $500. That was the transmission repair. That was the water heater patch plus groceries. That was almost exactly the amount I sent them every single month for the gaps. I looked at the note again. Same time next month. My stomach turned over. I needed to call them. I needed to ask, but something stopped me. A quiet, cold instinct that I did not recognize. It was the part of me that reviewed contracts for loopholes. If I asked them directly, they would have an answer. They always had an answer. It was a gift card. It was a mistake. It was a friend who paid cash and Dad put it on his card for the points. If I asked, and they lied, I would have to choose between believing the lie or calling my parents liars. I was not ready for that choice. Instead, I picked up my phone. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was bright, normal, not the weeping voice from the other night. Hi, Mom, I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. Sarah, what a nice surprise. We were just watching the news. How are you? I am okay, I said. I was just looking over my budget for the next few months. Oh? She said. Yeah, work is changing some of the compensation structures. It is nothing bad. But I'm going to have to be a little tighter with my cash flow for a while. I am trying a new savings plan. There was a silence on the line. It lasted only 2 seconds. But it was heavy. What does that mean? She asked. Her voice had dropped an octave. It was not angry, but it was devoid of the warmth that had been there a moment ago. It just means I have to be careful. I said, I will not have as much flexibility for unexpected things. Oh, she said again. Then, a pause. Then, the warmth returned, rushing back in like a tide. Well, of course, honey, you have to take care of yourself. You work so hard. We are fine. You do not need to worry about us. You are sure? I asked. The transmission is okay? It is running beautifully, she said. Thank you again for that. You saved us. I looked at the receipt on the counter. The date on the receipt was 3 days after I sent the money for the transmission. Okay, Mom, I said. I just wanted to let you know. We love you. Sarah, she said, I love you too. I hung up. My hands were shaking. I had heard it. The switch, the micro-adjustment in her tone when I threatened the supply line. It was fast. Professional, almost. She had assessed the threat, neutralized it with agreement, and then pivoted back to affection. I felt a wave of nausea. I felt ashamed for testing her. I was the bad daughter. I was the one setting traps for my own mother. But the receipt was still there. I spent the next 3 hours sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by paper. I logged into my bank account and downloaded my statements for the last 8 years. I exported them into a spreadsheet. I filtered for every transfer to my parents' account. I had never looked at the total. I had always looked at the individual instances. $50 here, $200 there, a big one for the furnace, a medium one for the dental crown. I highlighted the column and looked at the sum at the bottom right of the screen. $48,350. I stared at the number. $48,000. That was a down payment on a house. That was a master's degree. That was a wedding. That was my safety. I had given them nearly $50,000 in 8 years. I began to look at the dates. I filtered my own income. I looked at when my paychecks hit, the 1st and the 15th of every month. I looked at when my quarterly bonuses arrived. The correlation was impossible to ignore. My bonus hit on April 15th. My mother called with a tax emergency on April 17th. My raise went into effect on September 1st. My father needed new tires on September 4th. It was not random, it was rhythmic. They knew my schedule, they knew exactly when I was liquid. But that didn't make sense. They didn't have access to my accounts. How did they know? I remembered conversations, casual chats. "Oh, Sarah, are they giving you a bonus this year?" "Yes, Mom, it comes next week." "That is wonderful. Honey, you deserve it." I had told them. I had given them the schedule. I looked at the receipt again. The Ember Room. October 14th. I opened a map on my laptop. Briar Glen was 20 miles from their house. It wasn't just a local diner. They had driven there. I needed to see. I did not want to confront them. I could not face the idea of standing in their living room and waving a piece of paper in their faces. I was not that person. I was the peacemaker. I was the fixer. But I could not stay in my condo. The walls felt like they were closing in. I grabbed my keys. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night. The drive to Westbrook Ridge took me 45 minutes. I drove in silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the loop of thoughts running through my head. Maybe they saved up. Maybe they ate rice and beans for a month to afford one nice dinner. People did that. Poor people were allowed to have nice things sometimes. Was I being a classist snob against my own parents? Was I demanding that if they took my money, they had to perform misery for me? Yes, maybe that was it. Maybe I was the monster. I turned off the highway and navigated the winding roads toward their subdivision. Westbrook Ridge was a middle-class neighborhood built in the 90s. The houses were vinyl-sided, decent sizes, with 2-car garages. I turned onto their street. It was dark. The streetlights cast pools of orange light on the pavement. I did not pull into the driveway. I parked 3 houses down, in front of a neighbor's darkened home. I turned off my headlights. I sat there, looking at the house I had grown up in. I expected to see... what? I expected to see the house I carried in my mind during those phone calls. A house that was crumbling, a house with peeling paint, a sagging roof, a lawn gone to seed because they couldn't afford a mower. But the house looked fine, better than fine. The porch light was on. It illuminated the front steps. Last year, in July, my father had called me. He said the concrete step on the porch had cracked and crumbled away. He said it was dangerous, that the mailman had almost tripped. He needed $400 for a mason to come and pour a new step and fix the railing. I had sent the money. I squinted through the windshield. The steps looked old. They were weather-stained, gray, and settled. There was no fresh concrete. There was no bright white patch of repair. There was a crack running through the bottom step, filled with moss. It had never been fixed. My eyes moved to the left, under the bay window. There was a new stone planter. It was large, ornate, made of stacked slate. It was filled with decorative mums that looked fresh and manicured. I knew what those planters cost. I had seen them at the garden center. $200. Easy. The step was broken. The planter was new. I looked at the driveway, my father's car. A 3-year-old sedan was parked there. It looked clean. There was no oil stain underneath it. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a hollowing out. It was the feeling of gravity doubling. They had lied about the step. If they lied about the step, did they lie about the transmission? Did they lie about the medical bills? I looked at the house again. It was a stranger's house. It was a set piece. I had spent 8 years terrified that my parents were drowning. I had lost sleep wondering if they had heat, if they had food, if they were safe. I had denied myself vacations, clothes, experiences, all to keep them afloat. and they were buying slate planters. They were eating $50 steaks. I put the car in gear. I did not go to the door. I did not ring the bell. I could not face them. If I saw my mother's face right now, I would vomit. I drove back to Lake Haven. The receipt was tucked into the passenger seat. Inside the folder, it was no longer just a piece of paper. It was evidence. I walked into my condo just before midnight. The silence was different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with the weight of things unsaid. I took the folder and placed it on my dining table. I sat down and looked at it. This wasn't about one dinner. If it had just been one dinner, I could have forgiven it. I could have called it a lapse in judgment. But the note said, "Same time next month," and the steps were never fixed. And the total was $48,000. My memories of the last 8 years, the shared tears, the comforting words, the feeling that we were a team fighting against a cruel world, were sliding out of focus. I tried to grab them, to hold on to the version of my parents that I loved, but they were dissolving. I realized then that I did not know who Howard and Elaine Collins were. I knew the characters they played on the phone. I knew the victims, but I did not know the people who ate at the Ember Room. I needed to know them. I picked up the receipt and walked to my desk. I opened a fresh file folder. I placed the receipt inside. Then I printed the spreadsheet of the bank transfers. I put that in too. I closed the folder. I was done crying. I was done panicking. My parents wanted money? Fine. But first, I was going to get the truth. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the window, preparing for a war I hadn't known I was fighting. The morning after I found the receipt, I did not storm into my parents' house. I did not scream. I did not call the police. I went to work. I sat in a glass-walled conference room and listened to a client explain why their supply chain logistics were failing. And I nodded and took notes, and I felt absolutely nothing. My rage was a cold thing. It sat in my stomach like a stone, heavy and motionless. I knew that if I moved too fast, if I let the stone roll, it would crush everything. So I stayed still. I decided to act like the consultant I was. I would not make accusations. I would audit the account. I started with the utilities. For years, the story had been that the electricity and gas bills were the first things to slide when they were short. The shut-off notices were the weapon of choice. My mother would call, breathless, claiming the red notice had just arrived and they had 48 hours before the house went dark. I waited until my lunch break. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the engine running to keep the heat on, and I dialed my father's cell phone. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hello?" "Hey, Dad," I said. I kept my tone breezy, helpful. I was just looking at my finances, like I told Mom, and I wanted to streamline some things. I was thinking, to make it easier for everyone, I could just put your electric bill on auto pay from my account. That way, you never have to worry about the shut-off dates. And I do not have to do emergency transfers. It just handles itself. There was a silence on the line. It was the sound of a man calculating angles. "That is not necessary." "Sarah," he said. His voice was tight. "It is no trouble," I said. "Just give me the account number and the name of the provider. Is it ComEd or someone else? I can set it up right now on my phone." "No," he said. It came out sharper than he intended. He cleared his throat. I appreciate the offer. Sarah, really, but I like to handle the bills myself. I need to keep track of the usage. If it is on auto pay, I might miss if they overcharge us. You know how these companies are. They will bleed you dry if you are not watching. I gripped the steering wheel. "Dad," I said, "I can set up alerts. You will still get the paper bill. I just want to make sure the lights stay on." Mom sounded so stressed last time. "Your mother exaggerates," he said. "Look, Sarah, I am the man of this house. I handle the accounts. When we need help, we ask. But I am not going to hand over control of my household utilities to my daughter. It is a matter of privacy." "Privacy?" I asked. "I have paid that bill 6 times in the last year." "And we are grateful," he said. "But the answer is no. I have to go. The game is coming on." He hung up. I stared at the phone. He had chosen pride over financial security, or so it seemed, but if he was truly broke, if he was truly terrified of the dark, he would have wept with relief at the offer of autopay. A drowning man does not slap away a life preserver because he wants to control the swimming style. He refused because he did not want me to see the bill. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was my father again. "Sarah," he said. His voice was entirely different. It was soft, apologetic, the voice of a weary patriarch. "I am sorry I snapped earlier. I have been having a lot of back pain today. I did not mean to be ungrateful. It is okay. Dad, I looked into it," he continued. "And actually, we are ahead on the electric right now. I forgot I sent them a double payment last month when the tax refund came in, so we are good for a while. That is why I did not want you to worry about it." I closed my eyes. There was no tax refund. He had told me in April that they owed money to the IRS. I had sent them $600 to cover it. "Okay, Dad," I said. "That is great news." I hung up. The lie was so sloppy it was insulting. He had forgotten the previous lie in order to construct the new one. That evening, I went to Tessa's apartment. I brought a bottle of cheap wine and the folder. Tessa did not say "I told you so." She simply cleared off her dining table, pushing aside a stack of Architectural Digest magazines, and opened her laptop. "Give me the dates," she said. We spent 4 hours building the timeline. We used a spreadsheet. Column A was the date. Column B was the amount I sent. Column C was the reason they gave. Column D was the proof they offered. Column D was almost entirely blank. By 10 o'clock at night, the pattern was undeniable. "It is a loop," Tessa said, pointing at the screen. "Look, every 3 months, almost to the day, there is a car issue. February, May, August, November, and here," I said, pointing to another cluster, "medical copays. They always happen 2 weeks after a car issue. It is like a chaser. And look at the amounts," Tessa said. She highlighted the cells. 200, 300, 400, never more than 500 at once, except for the furnace incident. They are keeping it under the radar. If they asked for 2,000, you would ask for a contract. But 300? You just Venmo it to stop the noise. It is a subscription service. I whispered, "I am paying a monthly subscription to be their daughter." Tessa looked at me. Her expression was grim. "Sarah," she said, "what happens when you say no?" "Look at the timeline." I scanned the rows. "Here," I said, "June of last year. I told them I was short because I had to pay for my own car repair." "And 3 days later?" Tessa asked. I read the entry. "June 14th, Mom called. Dad fell in the shower. They needed money for a prescription painkiller that insurance would not cover." "I remember that," I said. I felt so guilty that I put the charge on my credit card. "Did you see the prescription?" Tessa asked. "No," I said. "I just sent the cash." Tessa closed the laptop. "They punish you for hesitation," she said. "Every time you try to set a boundary, the crisis escalates. They train you. Sarah, like a dog. You pull on the leash. You get shocked, so you stop pulling. The next day, I took a half day off work. I went to the Lake Haven Community Credit Union. This was not where my parents banked. They used a large national bank. But it was where I had my mortgage. I sat in the cubicle of a loan officer named Greg. He was a young guy with a bad haircut and a very earnest demeanor. "I have a theoretical question." I said, "I am writing a story about financial fraud." Greg blinked. "Okay, I love thrillers." "If someone wanted to appear broke," I said, "but they actually had money coming in, how would they hide it from a family member who might be looking at their main checking account? Say, a joint account?" Greg leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said, "it is actually pretty easy. If you are on a joint account, you can see everything in that bucket. But if one person opens a secondary savings account or a money market account and does not link it to the primary dashboard, the other person might not see it, especially if they have opted out of paper statements. And if money goes in there?" I asked. "It is invisible," he said. "Unless you have a court order or the login credentials for the entire profile. You could have $50,000 sitting in a sub-account, and the main checking could show a balance of $12. We see it in divorces all the time. One spouse siphons money into a side pot for years. And transfers? I asked. You can set up auto transfers to external accounts too, he said, or, if they are smart, they use cash. They withdraw cash from the main account, looks like groceries or gas, and then deposit that cash into a different bank entirely. I thanked him and left. My father was not a financial wizard. He was a man who still typed with 2 fingers, but he was cunning, and if he had help, if someone had shown him how to move the shells, he could hide an empire in the cracks of a checking account. I sat in my car in the credit union parking lot and looked at the Ember Room receipt again, the note. Same time next month. I picked up my phone and dialed the restaurant. Thank you for calling the Ember Room, a woman's voice said. Smooth, professional. Hi, I said. I was hoping to make a reservation for next Tuesday. I am sorry, she said instantly. We are fully committed for Tuesday. Oh, that is a shame, I said. My parents eat there often. They mentioned something about a preferred list or a club. I wanted to see if I could get on that. The voice on the other end changed. It became warmer, but also more guarded. May I ask who your parents are? Howard and Elaine Collins, I said. There was a pause. I heard the clicking of a keyboard. Ah, yes, she said. Mr. and Mrs. Collins are lovely. They are with the Briar Glen Dining Partner Program. What does that mean? I asked. Is it a membership? I am afraid I cannot discuss the details of our partner agreements, she said. But yes, those reservations are handled through the private dining club allocation. They are not standard bookings. If you are interested in membership, I would have to refer you to the association directly. We just provide the venue. Which association? I asked. I am sorry, she said. I really cannot say more. Is there anything else I can help you with? No, I said. Thank you. I hung up. It was not just a dinner. It was a club, a partner program. The date on the note was October 14th. Same time next month. That would be November 14th. That was tonight. I drove home. I changed out of my work clothes. I put on a dark hoodie and jeans. I felt ridiculous. I felt like a character in a bad movie, but I could not stop. I drove to Briar Glen. The Ember Room was located in a restored vintage hotel in the center of the town. It had valet parking and gas lanterns flickering by the entrance. I parked my car across the street, in the lot of a closed pharmacy. I had a clear view of the front door. I turned off the engine. It was 7 o'clock. I waited. At 7:30, a steady stream of luxury cars began to arrive. BMWs, Lexus SUVs, a vintage Jaguar. At 7:40, a silver sedan pulled up. It was my father's car, the one with the bad transmission. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a violent, physical thudding. The valet opened the door. My father stepped out. He was wearing a navy blue blazer with gold buttons. He was wearing slacks that were pressed and sharp. He looked healthy. He looked robust. He did not look like a man who couldn't afford his blood pressure medication. Then my mother stepped out. I stopped breathing. She was wearing a dress I had never seen. It was a deep emerald green, silk or satin, catching the light from the lanterns. She had a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her hair was done, professionally done, lifted and sprayed into a shape that defied the wind. She looked beautiful. She also looked rich. They walked toward the entrance. They did not look hesitant. They did not look like people treating themselves to a rare splurge. They walked with the easy confidence of ownership. The host at the door, a tall man in a suit, stepped out to greet them. He shook my father's hand. He kissed my mother on the cheek. They were not customers. They were regulars. I watched them disappear inside. I should have driven away. I had seen enough, but my legs were numb. I couldn't find the pedals. 5 minutes later, the heavy oak doors opened again, and the host led them through the lobby, past the main dining room that was visible through the front windows, and toward a corridor in the back. They were going to a private room. I waited. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping they would come running out, claiming it was a mistake. 10 minutes passed. Then, another car pulled up, a black Mercedes. A couple got out. They were older, perhaps in their 60s. The man was tall, silver-haired, wearing a camel hair coat. The woman was petite, sharp-featured, wearing a fur stole. I recognized them, not from my life, but from the periphery of my memory. I had seen them in the background of photos my mother posted on Facebook. Not of herself, but of community events she claimed to just be attending as a volunteer. They were Marion and Lowell Klein. I knew the name because Lowell Klein owned a chain of car dealerships in the county. They were local royalty. They walked in. The host greeted them with the same deference. He led them down the same corridor. My parents were having dinner with the Kleins. My parents, who had asked me for $50 last week to buy groceries because the fridge is empty, were in a private room with the wealthiest people in Briar Glen. I put my head on the steering wheel. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive my car through the front window of the restaurant. Instead, I started the engine and drove home. I cried the whole way. It wasn't the money anymore. It was the humiliation. They were laughing at me. Every time I sent a transfer, every time I offered to pay a bill, I was the punchline to a joke I didn't know was being told. 2 days later, the call came. It was my mother, Sarah. She said, her voice was tight, panicked. "It is your father. What happened?" I asked. I was sitting at my desk, looking at the spreadsheet Tessa and I had made. We were due for a crisis. It was right on schedule. He went to the specialist for his back. She said, "The insurance is refusing to cover the MRI. They say it is elective, but he can barely walk." "Sarah, the doctor says if he does not get the scan, he could have permanent nerve damage." "How much?" I asked. $600, she said. "We have to pay it up front, or they will not do the scan." "We are at the clinic right now." I looked at the calendar. "November 16th. Send me the bill." I said, "What?" "Send me a picture of the bill." "Mom, the invoice from the clinic." There was a pause. "Honey, we are at the desk. I cannot just start taking pictures of paperwork. It is rude." "It is not rude." I said, "It is standard. Just snap a photo with your phone and text it to me. I need it for my records." "Your records?" Her voice rose. "Sarah, he is in pain. Why are you doing this? I am just asking for a receipt." "Mom, if you want the money, send the photo." She hung up on me. I sat there, my heart racing. I thought maybe I had gone too far. Maybe he really was hurt. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a photo. It was blurry. It was taken in bad lighting. It showed a piece of paper with the number $600 circled in red pen. But the top of the paper, the letterhead, the name of the clinic, the date, was cut off. The bottom, where the account number would be, was covered by a thumb. It was not a mistake. You had to try hard to take a photo that bad. I zoomed in. The font looked generic. It looked like something printed from a home computer. I did not reply. I did not send the money. That afternoon, I had an appointment with Dr. Nolan Greer. I had been seeing him for 6 months to deal with what I thought was work-related burnout. I sat on his leather couch and told him everything. The receipt, the stakeout, the Kleins, the blurry photo. "I feel like I'm going crazy." I said, "I feel like I am the villain. They are my parents. Maybe they need this social life to feel human. Maybe I am being stingy." "Doctor?" Greer looked at me over his glasses. "Sarah," he said, "let's look at the transaction. You are buying their love. What are they selling?" "They are selling me the opportunity to be the savior." I said, "No." He said, "They are selling you guilt. They manufacture a crisis. You solve it. And for a moment, you feel indispensable. And they feel powerful because they can snap their fingers and make you jump. But why?" I asked. "Why lie? If they want to go to dinner, just tell me. Because if they told you they had money, you would stop giving them yours," he said. "And more importantly, the dynamic would change. You would be equals, or God forbid, you would be the successful one who doesn't need them. By staying broke, they force you to stay engaged. They force you to worry about them. It is a form of intimacy. Sarah. A very sick, parasitic form of intimacy. So what do? I asked. You set a boundary, he said. And you have to understand something. A boundary is not a punishment. It is a definition of where you end and they begin. They will hate it. I said. They might, he said. But right now, you are setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, and they are not even cold. They are wearing fur coats. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table. I drafted an email. I decided against a phone call. I needed it to be in writing. I needed a paper trail. Dear Mom and Dad, I am writing this because I love you and I want to be honest with you. I have been reviewing my own financial goals, and I realized I can no longer support you with cash transfers for bills or emergencies. I need to focus on my own savings. I am hitting pause on all financial assistance for the next 30 days. I know this might be stressful, so to help, I have set up a grocery delivery service. I have paid for a credit of $400 for the month. You can order whatever food you need, and it will be delivered to your door. But I cannot send cash. I hope you understand. Love, Sarah. I hit send. I stared at the screen. My hands were sweating. I waited. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I let it go again. Then, a text came from her. Sarah, I am shaking. I do not understand. Did we do something to offend you? Your father is devastated. He thinks you are punishing him for the electric bill conversation. We are family. We help each other. Please call me. We are scared. It was a masterclass. Guilt, fear, obligation. I did not reply. An hour later, another text. Thank you for the grocery offer. It is very generous, but we cannot pay the doctor with groceries. We cannot put gas in the car with groceries. I guess we will just have to figure it out. I hope you sleep well knowing we are scrambling. The theatrical gratitude pivoting instantly to cold silence. I stared at the wall. I felt sick. I felt like I had punched a kitten. Then, my phone buzzed one more time. It was a text from my father. Do what you want. 4 words. No anger. No pleading. Just a flat dismissal. It was the most hurtful thing he could have sent. It meant, you are dead to me unless you are useful. I did not sleep that night. I sat up, scrolling through my old emails, looking for something to anchor me. I needed to know I wasn't crazy. I searched for Mom and Dad in my inbox. I went back years. I read old emails about birthdays, about holidays. Then I found it. It was an email from 5 years ago. My mother had forwarded me a chain letter, one of those recipe exchange things where you send a recipe to the person at the top of the list. She had forwarded it to me, but she had forgotten to delete the previous thread below it. I scrolled down, past the recipes, past the instructions. There was a short email from a woman named Marion to my mother, Elaine. Just a reminder that the Briar Glen Circle dues are coming up on the 1st. We are so excited about the winter gala. Your table is going to be fabulous. Let me know if you need the invoice sent to the PO box, the Briar Glen Circle. I froze. I had heard that name. It was a charitable organization, a high society club in the county. They threw balls. They raised money for wings of hospitals. My parents were paying dues. They weren't just eating at the Ember Room. They were members of the Circle. I Googled Briar Glen Circle membership fees. The website was vague. Membership by invitation only. But I found a forum post on a local community board from 3 years ago. Someone asking about the cost. The reply was, initiation is $10,000, annual dues are $5,000, plus a mandatory donation minimum. I looked at the number. $5,000 a year. I looked at my spreadsheet. I had sent them exactly $5,200 last year. I wasn't paying for their survival. I was paying their dues. I closed my laptop. The sickness in my stomach was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I had a name now, the Briar Glen Circle, and I was going to find out exactly what my parents had bought with my life. The Briar Glen Circle was not a secret society. It did not have hooded robes or underground lairs. It was something far more insidious. It was a brand. I spent the weekend digging through their digital footprint. Their website was a masterpiece of vague benevolence. Photos of smiling children, diversity-calibrated group shots, and elegantly dressed people holding champagne flutes in front of banners that said, "Community First." They listed their pillars as philanthropy, leadership, and connection. It wasn't a scam in the legal sense. They were a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, but as I read through their annual reports and newsletters, the subtext became clear. The Circle was a machine for social laundering. It was where the upper middle class of the county went to buy legitimacy. If you were a member of the Circle, you weren't just a car dealer or a retired logistics manager. You were a patron. You were a community pillar. The price of admission was money. Yes, but it was also performance. You had to look the part. You had to host tables. You had to bid on silent auction items you didn't need. My parents were not just members. They were active participants. I found my mother's name listed on the gala committee 3 years in a row. I found a photo of my father handing a giant check to a local animal shelter. Beaming like a senator, the caption read, "Howard and Elaine Collins, Silver Benefactors." Silver Benefactor meant an annual contribution of at least $2,000 on top of dues. I stared at the screen. That was the year my father had needed emergency dental surgery. That was the year I had canceled my trip to Italy to send them $3,000. They had taken my Italy money and given it to a dog shelter, so they could get their picture in the newsletter. I felt a cold, sharp anger that was different from the grief I had felt before. This wasn't just about money. It was about theft. They had stolen my life experiences to purchase their own vanity. I needed to see them in their natural habitat. The Circle was hosting a public fundraiser on Thursday night at the Harbor Light Pavilion in Lake Haven. It was called Winter Warmth, a benefit for heating assistance for low-income families. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I couldn't just walk in. Tickets were $200 a plate, but Tessa came through. My cousin dates a guy who does the AV for these things. Tessa told me over the phone, "He can get us on the guest list as event partners. Just wear black and try to look bored." The Harbor Light Pavilion was a massive glass structure overlooking the lake. It was the kind of venue that smelled of expensive perfume and catering sternos. When we walked in, the air was humming with the polite murmur of 300 people who all knew they were important. I wore a simple black dress and kept my hair pulled back. I felt like a spy in my own hometown. We stood near the bar, holding sparkling water. I scanned the room. It took me a moment to find them because I was looking for the parents I knew, the ones who hunched their shoulders, who wore sensible shoes, who looked perpetually worried about the future. Those people were not here. I saw my mother first. She was standing in a circle of 3 other women near the silent auction tables. She was wearing a midnight blue gown with a sequined bodice. It fit her perfectly. She was holding a wine glass by the stem, her posture erect, her head thrown back in laughter. I moved closer, weaving through the crowd, keeping a large potted fern between us. "Oh, stop it. Linda," I heard my mother say. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was lower, smoother. It lacked the tremulous anxiety she used with me. "We are thinking of redoing the kitchen in the spring. Howard wants to knock out that wall." But I told him, if we are going to do it, we are going to do it right. I want the quartz this time. The quartz. My mother, who had cried to me last month that they couldn't afford brand-name peanut butter, was discussing quartz countertops. I watched her for 5 minutes. She was fluent in this language. She talked about contractors, about vacations to the vineyard, about the exhausting schedule of the holidays. She didn't look like an imposter. She looked like she belonged here more than she had ever belonged in my kitchen. Then I saw my father. He was standing near the entrance to the VIP area, talking to a younger man in a sharp gray suit. I recognized the man from billboards around town. Elliot Prentice. He was a realtor with Prentice Row, the agency that handled the high-end properties in Briar Glen. I edged closer, turning my back to them and pretending to study a silent auction display for a spa day. "We will keep it off the neighborhood sites like last time." Howard, I heard Elliot say. His voice was low, conspiratorial. You do not want the looky-loos knowing your business. I can have the paperwork ready by Monday. I appreciate that. Elliot, my father said. His voice was firm, commanding. We just want to move quickly on this one. The market is right. I did not understand. Were they selling the house? Moving? If they were selling, that would explain the money. But no, they had been crying poor for 8 years. You don't sell a house for 8 years. Elliot handed my father a thin blue folder. My father tucked it under his arm. Same terms as the last parcel? My father asked. Elliot nodded. Exactly. Just sign the disclosures. Last parcel. My throat tightened. What parcel? They lived in a subdivision. They owned a 1/4-acre lot. There were no parcels. I waited until Elliot walked away toward the bar. My father turned, scanning the room, looking for my mother. I stepped out from behind the display. Dad, I said. He flinched. It was a physical jerk, like he had been touched with a live wire. He spun around, his eyes wide. For a second, I saw the panic, the real panic, not the performed one. Sarah? He hissed. What are you doing here? I live in Lake Haven. Dad? I said. I came to support the Heating Assistance Fund, since, utilities are such a struggle for everyone. He looked around quickly, checking if anyone was listening. He forced a smile onto his face, but his eyes were hard. You should not be here, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. This is a private event. It is a public fundraiser. I said, I bought a ticket. I lied. But he didn't know that. What is in the folder? Dad? I asked, nodding at the blue file under his arm. He pulled it tighter against his side. It is nothing, he said. Just some volunteer paperwork. For the committee. You are volunteering with a real estate agency? I asked. He stepped closer to me. His cologne was expensive, sandalwood and leather. I had never smelled it on him before. Sarah, stop it, he said. You are making a scene. Do not embarrass us. The word hit me like a slap. Embarrass. Not, I am sorry. Not, let me explain. But, do not embarrass us. I was the embarrassment. The daughter who paid the bills was the embarrassment in the room full of people who thought my parents were rich. I am not the one pretending to be someone I am not, I said quietly. He glared at me. His face was flushed. You do not know what you are talking about. He said, Go home. Sarah, we will talk later. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd toward my mother. He grabbed her elbow, whispered something in her ear, and steered her toward the far exit. They were retreating. I stood there, surrounded by the smell of roast beef and money, and felt a profound sense of dislocation. They were running away from me, their own daughter, because I had seen the costume. The next morning, I took the day off. I went to the county recorder's office. I needed to know what parcel meant. I pulled the property records from my parents' address in Westbrook Ridge. They had bought the house 30 years ago. The mortgage had been paid off in 2015. I stared at the document. Mortgage release. August 12, 2015. They had no mortgage. For the last 8 years, the exact 8 years I had been sending them money, they had been mortgage-free. But they had told me they were refinancing. They had told me the payments were going up because of interest rates. They had told me they were in danger of foreclosure 3 separate times. All lies. But then I saw something else. In 2018, there was a new lien, a home equity line of credit for $100,000, and then, in 2021, another lien, a second mortgage for $75,000, and then, 6 months ago, a release of lien. The second mortgage was paid off in full. How? How did you pay off $75,000 in a lump sum while claiming you couldn't afford a transmission repair? And then I found the parcel. It wasn't their house. It was a separate property, a vacant lot in Briar Glen, 1/2 an acre, purchased 4 years ago by an LLC called H.E. Holdings. I looked at the registered agent for H.E. Holdings, Howard Collins. They owned land in Briar Glen. They were speculating on real estate. I sat back in the hard plastic chair of the recorder's office. They weren't broke. They were leveraged. They were playing a high-stakes game of real estate investment and social climbing, moving money between lines of credit and LLCs, and using my money, my steady, reliable, guilt-driven transfers, as the grease to keep the wheels turning. My money covered the cash flow gaps. My money paid the interest while they waited for the market to turn. I was not a daughter. I was a zero-interest microlender. I needed professional eyes on this, not a therapist, a forensic accountant. But I couldn't afford one, and I didn't want to explain this to a stranger who charged $400 an hour. I remembered a flyer I had seen at the community center: Open Ledge Financial Wellness, nonprofit financial coaching. I made an appointment with a woman named Mara Denning. Mara was in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. Her office was small and cluttered with pamphlets about debt consolidation and predatory lending. I laid it out as a hypothetical. I have a friend, I said. Her parents ask for money constantly, small amounts, but she found out they own investment property and belong to a private club. What is that? Mara took off her glasses. It is financial abuse, she said, but a specific kind. We call it status maintenance. Status maintenance? People who feel entitled to a certain lifestyle but cannot sustain it on their own income, she explained. Instead of downsizing, they outsource the deficit. Usually to family members, they create a crisis cycle. The car, the medical bill, the roof. It is always urgent so the victim does not have time to think. It is always just enough money to hurt, but not enough to ruin the victim, so the source does not dry up. But why the secrecy? I asked. Why not just say, "We made a bad investment. Help us"? Because then you would have an opinion. Mara said, if they admit it is an investment, you get to ask about the return. You get to criticize the strategy. But if it is a medical emergency, you just pay. It shuts down critical thinking. It leverages your empathy against your logic. She pushed a piece of paper toward me. Look for the third party. She said, What do you mean? Schemes like this rarely happen in a vacuum. She said, if they are moving that kind of money, paying off liens, buying land, they have advice. Someone is helping them structure it. Someone is telling them how to look poor on paper while building equity elsewhere. I thought about Elliot Prentice. We will keep it off the neighborhood sites. I thanked Mara and left. I felt sick, but also validated. I wasn't crazy. I was being played. I went back to the bank statements. I looked for the third party. I couldn't see their accounts, but I could look at the transfers I had made to them. I looked at the endorsements on the checks I had written in the early years, before I switched to digital transfers. Most were just signed Howard Collins. But one check, from 5 years ago, a big one, $2,000 for emergency taxes, had a second stamp on the back, paid to the order of Hearthstone Advisory Group. I Googled it. Hearthstone Advisory Group was a boutique consulting firm in Briar Glen. Their website was minimal: wealth management, legacy planning, community consulting. I searched for the company name in the county records. Hearthstone Advisory Group was the entity that had sold the vacant lot to HE Holdings, and Hearthstone Advisory Group was listed as a sponsor for the Briar Glen Circle. It was a closed loop. My parents took my money. They gave it to Hearthstone. Hearthstone sold them land and access to the circle. The circle gave them status, and the status made them feel entitled to more of my money. And the kicker? Hearthstone Advisory Group made small regular deposits into accounts linked to the circle's leadership program. I found a public disclosure form for the circle's nonprofit status. It listed payments to community consultants. My father was listed as a consultant. He was getting paid. He was getting paid to recruit, to host dinners, to bring people into the fold. The broke narrative wasn't just to get my money, it was to hide his income. If he told me he was making money from the circle, I would stop paying his bills. So he hid the income, cried poverty, and double-dipped. He was profiting from both sides. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my condo. I hadn't buzzed her in. She had tailgated a neighbor through the front door. I opened my unit door to find her standing there, wearing a raincoat and looking small and wet. It was raining, but she had an umbrella in her hand. She had chosen to get wet. It was a costume choice. "Sarah," she said, her voice cracking. "Please." I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, blocking the view of my living room. "What do you want?" "Mom, your father hasn't slept in 3 days," she said. "He is pacing the floor. He thinks you hate us. He thinks you are going to cut us off forever. I sent you the grocery credit." I said, "Did you use it?" She waved her hand dismissively. "We do not need groceries. Sarah, we need our daughter back. We need to know you are not against us. I am not against you." I said, "I am against being lied to." "We never lied," she cried. Tears spilled over her cheeks, real tears. She believed her own performance. "We protected you. We didn't want you to worry about the big things, so we handled them. We just needed help with the little things." "The little things?" I asked. "Like $50,000? Like a vacant lot in Briar Glen?" Her face went white. She stopped crying instantly. The tears simply turned off. "You went through our papers," she said. Her voice was ice. "I went through public records." I said, "You have no right." She hissed, "That is our business. That is our future. We are doing this for you. Sarah, we are building a legacy. Who do you think gets that land when we die? You. I don't want the land." "Mom," I said, "I want the last 8 years of my life back. I want the vacations I didn't take. I want the savings I don't have." "You are being selfish," she spat. "You have a good job. You have everything. We have nothing. We are trying to build something so we are not just nobodies in a ranch house, and you are punishing us for it. I am not punishing you." I said, "I am setting a boundary. I am done. No more money. Not a cent." She stared at me. Her eyes were full of a rage I had never seen before. It was the rage of an addict whose supply had been cut. "You will regret this," she said. "You think you can just walk away? We made you." I closed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I was shaking, but I didn't open the door. That night, I sat on my floor with a box of old photos I had taken from their house years ago. I was looking for clues. I was looking for the beginning of the lie. I found a photo from 6 years ago. It was from a charity gala my parents had attended. They had told me tickets were free because they volunteered to check coats. In the photo, my parents were standing in the ballroom, holding champagne. Standing next to them were Marion and Lowell Klein, and standing next to the Kleins, with her arm linked through Marion's, was a woman with sharp blonde hair and a predatory smile. Gwen Lark. I dropped the photo. Gwen Lark had been my manager at my first big job out of college. She was the one who had fired me. She had told me I lacked the killer instinct and that I wasn't culturally fit for the firm. It had devastated me. It had taken me 2 years to rebuild my confidence, and here she was, standing with the Kleins, standing with my parents. I looked at the date on the photo. It was taken 3 weeks before I was fired. My parents knew her. My parents were in the same circle as the woman who had derailed my career. Had they known? Had they talked about me? Or worse, had my firing been part of the status maintenance? Had I been sacrificed professionally so they could fit in socially? I remembered something Gwen had said to me in my exit interview. "You are a sweet girl. Sarah, maybe too sweet. Your family relies on you a lot, don't they?" That kind of pressure can be distracting. She knew. My parents had discussed me with her. They had probably painted me as the fragile, burdened daughter who needed their help, reversing the reality to make themselves look like saints. The betrayal expanded. It wasn't just financial anymore. It was professional. It was existential. They had used my failure to bond with their new friends. I picked up the photo. I looked at their smiles. They looked like wolves. And I was the sheep they had brought to the slaughter. I needed to see the web from the inside. Gwen Lark was the managing director of a boutique recruiting firm now, having moved on from the agency where she had fired me 4 years ago. I found her on LinkedIn. I sent a message, carefully calibrated to stroke her ego. I told her I was at a crossroads in my career and that her mentorship had always stuck with me. I asked for 20 minutes of her time to buy her coffee. She accepted within 10 minutes. We met at a cafe in downtown Lake Haven, a place with exposed brick and $6 lattes. Gwen looked exactly the same as she had the day she handed me my severance package. Polished, predatory, and impeccably styled in a cream-colored suit that cost more than my first car. "Sarah," she said, leaning in for an air kiss that didn't graze my skin, "you look wonderful. A little tired, maybe? But the consultant life is a grinder, isn't it?" "It is," I said, smiling the smile I used for difficult clients. "That is actually why I wanted to talk. I am thinking about my next move." We spent 15 minutes talking about the market, about pivot strategies, about personal branding. She was charming. She was insightful. It was easy to forget that she had once told me I was too soft for business. Then, I dropped the bait. "I was actually in Briar Glen the other night," I said casually, stirring my coffee. "I drove past the Ember Room. It looks lovely." Gwen's eyes lit up. "Oh, it is divine," she said. "The steak tartare is to die for. My parents go there quite a bit." I said, "Howard and Elaine Collins?" I watched her face. I looked for the flicker of recognition, the hesitation. Instead, her face softened into genuine warmth. "Elaine!" she exclaimed. "Oh, I just adore Elaine. She is such a force of nature. We were just together at the committee planning breakfast last week. She has the most wonderful ideas for the spring gala centerpieces. My mother, the woman who claimed she was too depressed about money to get out of bed some mornings." "I didn't know you were close," I said, keeping my voice level. "We have been in the circle together for years." Gwen said, "Your father is a hoot. Too, he is always the first one to volunteer for the heavy lifting. You must be so proud of them. They are real pillars of the community." Pillars. I took a sip of my coffee to hide my reaction. "They are great." I said, "They do not tell me much about their social life. They are very humble. That is just like them." Gwen said, nodding, "Quiet generosity. That is the best kind." I walked out of that coffee shop with a trembling sensation in my hands. It wasn't caffeine. It was the vibration of two parallel realities slamming into each other. To the circle. Howard and Elaine Collins were wealthy, generous, energetic leaders who volunteered and hosted dinners. To me, they were frail, broken, terrified seniors who needed their daughter to save them from the dark. Both stories were lies, but both stories were necessary. They needed the circle to feel important, and they needed me to pay for the costume. I went back to the paperwork. I had the name Hearthstone Advisory Group. I knew they were the conduit, but I needed to know the mechanism. I took a risk. I called the main line of Hearthstone, pretending to be an assistant from a venue in the city. "Hi," I said, "I am calling regarding the Collins contract. We are trying to verify the billing address for the upcoming leadership dinner they are hosting. I have Hearthstone listed as the payer, but Mr. Collins as the host." The receptionist didn't even blink. "Oh, right," she said. "All the community consulting invoices go through the main Hearthstone account. Mr. and Mrs. Collins are just the on-site facilitators. They are compensated for the hosting duty separately." Compensated. My parents weren't spending $500 at the Ember Room. They were working. They were being paid to host recruitment dinners for potential new circle members. The receipt I found wasn't just a dinner bill. It was an expense report. They likely got reimbursed for it, plus a fee. They were double dipping. They charged Hearthstone for the dinner, and they charged me for the crisis that the dinner supposedly caused. I sat back in my chair. The brilliance of it was sickening. They had turned their social climbing into a revenue stream, and I was the unsuspecting investor who covered the overhead. Then I found the date that broke me. I was cross-referencing my bank transfers with the Circle's public announcements on their Facebook page. I scrolled back 3 years, then 4, then 8. I found a post from 8 years ago, September 12th. "We are thrilled to announce a gold-level pledge from the Collins family." Howard and Elaine have generously committed $2,000 to our youth arts initiative. Thank you for giving back. September 12th. I opened my bank app. I scrolled to September of that year. September 10th. Transfer to mom. $2,000. I remembered that call. I remembered it vividly. My father had been in the hospital for chest pains. My mother said the ambulance ride wasn't covered by insurance. She said they were going to send it to collections. She was hysterical. I had drained my entire emergency fund, money I had saved for a move to a safer apartment, and wired it to them. There was no ambulance bill. There were no chest pains. I had paid for their gold-level pledge. They had taken my safety, my security, my fear for my father's life, and they had turned it into a plaque on a wall. They had stood on a stage and accepted applause for money that I had wept over losing. I closed my laptop. I walked into my bathroom and threw up. I made an emergency appointment with Dr. Greer. I didn't sit on the couch this time. I paced the small office. It is not the money, I said. I kept repeating it. It is not the money. If they had asked me for money to join a club, I might have said no, but I wouldn't feel like this. I wouldn't feel violated. What is the violation? Doctor? Greer asked. He was watching me closely. They used my empathy as a currency. I said, they manufactured pain. They made me afraid my father was dying so they could look rich. He nodded. They used your love as a costume, he said. They wore your generosity to the ball, and they did not care that you were shivering in the cold. I need to tell them. I said, I need to scream at them. Screaming is just noise. Doctor, Greer said, they are immune to noise. They thrive on noise. Drama feeds the cycle. If you scream, they get to be the victims again. They get to say you are unstable. So what do? You give them facts. He said, you remove the emotion. You hand them a mirror and force them to look at the reflection. I went home and wrote the letter. It was 3 pages long. It was not a diary entry. It was an audit. Date, September 10th. Amount, $2,000. Reason given, ambulance fee. Actual use, circle pledge. Date, October 14th. Amount, $500. Reason given, transmission repair. Actual use, dinner at the Ember Room. I listed 30 instances. I attached copies of the transfers. I attached the screenshots of the Circle's posts. I attached the receipt. I did not write, I hate you. I did not write, how could you? I wrote, this is the record of our financial relationship. It is based on fraud. It ends today. I did not send it. Not yet. I called Mara Denning at Open Ledge. Do you do family mediation? I asked. We do. She said, we have a facilitator named Jonah Pike. He specializes in financial conflict. I want to bring them in. I said, I want a neutral third party in the room. If I do this alone, they will gaslight me until I apologize for catching them. I contacted my parents. I told them I wanted to discuss a structured repayment plan and that I had hired a professional to help us organize their budget so I could continue to help them in a sustainable way. I lied, but it was the only bait they would take. They agreed immediately. Oh, Sarah, thank you. My mother texted. We were so worried. A professional is a great idea. We just want to get back on track. They thought they were coming to negotiate a new allowance. We met in a conference room at the Open Ledge offices. It was a sterile room with gray carpet and a whiteboard. Jonah Pike sat at the head of the table. He was a calm, heavy-set man with a voice like gravel. My parents arrived 10 minutes early. My mother tried to hug me. I stepped back behind a chair. She looked hurt, then smoothed her expression into one of brave suffering. My father shook Jonah's hand firmly, acting the part of the responsible businessman falling on hard times. Let us begin, Jonah said. Sarah has prepared some documentation regarding the history of support. My father smiled. We appreciate Sarah so much. He said, she has been a blessing. We know it has been a strain. We never wanted to be a burden. I slid the binder across the table. This is not a budget meeting, I said. My voice was steady, but my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This is a review of the funds I have provided over the last 8 years, and the discrepancies I have found in how those funds were used. My father frowned. He opened the binder. He looked at the first page, the spreadsheet. He flipped the page, the screenshot of the pledge. He flipped again, the Ember Room receipt. The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed. "What is this?" my father asked. His voice had lost the businessman warmth. It was low and dangerous. "It is proof." I said, "Proof of what?" my mother asked. She leaned over to look. Her eyes widened. "Proof that you were not broke." I said, "Proof that you used the money I sent for emergencies to pay for memberships, donations, and investment properties." My mother let out a sharp laugh. It sounded brittle. "Investment properties? Sarah, do not be ridiculous. That land is a burden. We are trying to sell it. We only bought it to protect the family assets. You bought it with the money I sent for your heart medication." I said, "We never forced you to send anything," my father shouted. He slammed the binder shut. Jonah held up a hand. "Mr. Collins, please keep your voice down. You wanted to help." My father turned on me, his face turning red. "You called us. You asked if we were okay. We didn't hold a gun to your head. If you wanted to give us money, that was your choice. You are a grown woman. I gave you money because you told me you were in danger." I said, "I gave you money because Mom cried on the phone and said the lights were getting turned off. We were stressed." My mother cried out. She was twisting a tissue in her hands. "You do not know what it is like. Sarah, the pressure. We have to maintain certain connections. For your father's consulting work, it takes money to make money. We were building a future for all of us. By lying to me?" I asked. "We didn't lie." My father said, "We managed the narrative. You are too sensitive. Sarah, you always have been. You take everything so literally." "Literally?" I pointed at the binder. "You faked a medical invoice. You sent me a blurry photo of a piece of paper you printed at home. That is fraud. Dad." He stood up. "How dare you?" He said, "I raised you. I paid for your college. I put a roof over your head for 18 years. And you are going to sit here with a calculator and keep score? You ungrateful little—" "Mr. Collins." Jonah cut in, his voice sharp. "Sit down. I am not sitting down." My father spat. "This is an ambush. My daughter is clearly having some kind of breakdown. She has been unstable lately. Work stress, probably. She is imagining things." I looked at him. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was furious that the prop had started talking back. "I am not unstable," I said, "and I am not giving you another cent." My mother looked at me. Her eyes were cold, assessing. "You are going to ruin us." She said quietly, "If you stop helping, we will lose the standing. People will talk. Is that what you want? To humiliate your family?" "I want my money back." I said, "You will not get blood from a stone." My father said, "Then I will take the stone." I said, "I want a lien on the Briar Glen lot." My father laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "You are dreaming," he said. "Come on. Elaine, we are leaving." They walked out. My father didn't look back. My mother paused at the door, gave me a look of profound disappointment, as if I were the one who had failed, and followed him. Jonah looked at me. "Well," he said, "that went about as well as I expected." I felt a strange sense of relief. The worst had happened. They had rejected the truth. But I had said it. I had put it in the room. The next day, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the message 10 minutes later. "Sarah, dear, this is Marion Klein. I hope you are doing well." Her voice was like warm honey. "Your mother mentioned you were having a difficult time. I just wanted to reach out as a friend of the family. I know emotions can run high, but I wanted to give you a little motherly advice. Be very careful with accusations. Sweetheart, the circle takes its reputation very seriously, and so do the members. People who misunderstand our community and spread misinformation can sometimes find themselves in legal trouble. We would hate to see a bright young woman like you get bogged down in a defamation suit. Just something to think about. Give my love to your parents. I sat on my bed, holding the phone. It was a threat. A polite, grandmotherly threat. My parents had gone to the Kleins. They had spun the story. They had told Marion that I was making trouble. And Marion, the woman who stood next to them in the photos, the woman who ran the circle, was circling the wagons. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. I had poked a beast. I went to work the next day, but my brain was foggy. I was staring at a spreadsheet for a client, trying to calculate projected earnings, and the numbers kept swimming. I saw $500. I saw $2,000. I missed a meeting. I completely forgot it. My supervisor, a woman named Karen who had always been supportive, came to my desk. "Sarah," she said, "you missed the strategy sync. Is everything okay?" I looked at her. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say I had a migraine, but I was done with lies. "No," I said, "everything is not okay. I am dealing with a significant family legal situation. It involves financial fraud." Karen's eyes widened. "I need to take a leave," I said. 2 weeks? I cannot focus, and I do not want to compromise the client's work. Karen nodded slowly. "Take the time," she said. "Do what you need to do." I walked out of the office. I felt lighter. I had protected my job by being honest. It was the exact opposite of what my parents would have done. I went home and turned off my phone, but before I did, I saw a notification on Facebook. It was a message from my Aunt Linda, my father's sister. She lived in Ohio. We rarely spoke. "Sarah." The message read, "I just got off the phone with your dad. I am so sorry to hear you are struggling. I know work makes you cold sometimes, but please do not take it out on your parents. They are barely scraping by as it is. Your dad sounded heartbroken that you won't even talk to them. Try to find some compassion in your heart. Success isn't everything." I stared at the screen. They had gotten to the family. They had laundered the narrative. In their version, I was the cold, successful, heartless daughter who had abandoned her poor, struggling parents because I was unstable and obsessed with money. They had turned the victim into the villain. I didn't reply to Aunt Linda. I didn't try to explain. I realized then that I couldn't win the war of words. They were better at storytelling than I was. They had had a lifetime of practice. If I was going to end this, I couldn't use words. I couldn't use mediation. I had to use the one thing they couldn't spin. I had to use the law. I opened my laptop and searched for attorneys in Lake Haven who specialized in fraud. I was done being the daughter. I was the plaintiff now. The silence in my apartment was no longer empty. It was filled with the rhythmic, mechanical whir of my laser printer. I had stopped crying. I had stopped pacing. I had stopped calling my best friend at 2 a.m. to ask if I was a terrible daughter. The time for emotion had passed. I was now operating in a state of cold, clinical detachment. I was not a victim. I was an auditor. My dining room table, once the place where I ate lonely dinners after 60-hour work weeks, was now a command center. I had bought a box of hanging files and a label maker. I was organizing the wreckage of the last 8 years into chronological order. Folder 1, bank transfers. Folder 2, text messages. Folder 3, the Ember Room. Folder 4, circle public announcements. I worked with the precision I used for my corporate clients. I downloaded every bank statement from 2015 to the present. I highlighted every transfer to my parents in yellow. I cross-referenced the dates with my text history, which I had exported using a third-party software. The patterns were even more glaring in hard copy. August 3rd, 2019. Text from Mom. Dad is so embarrassed to ask, but the air conditioning compressor died. It is 90 degrees in the house. He is sitting in front of a fan with a wet towel. The repair is $400. Transfer from Sarah. $450. August 5th, 2019. Facebook post from the Briar Glen Circle. A magical evening at the summer solstice garden party. Thank you to our hosts. Howard and Elaine Collins, for the beautiful floral arrangements and the vintage wine selection. They hadn't fixed the AC. They had bought wine for a garden party. I printed the screenshot. I stapled it to the bank transfer record. I placed it in the binder. I did this for hours. I built a dossier of fraud. It was 3 inches thick. It was a physical manifestation of my stupidity. But it was also a weapon. It proved that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable, as my father had claimed. I was simply the financier of a life they could not afford but refused to abandon. I needed to know how to use it. I made an appointment with Avery Shaw. She was a partner at Shaw and Linton Legal Services, a firm in the next town over. I chose them because they had no connection to Briar Glen. I couldn't risk walking into an office where the managing partner played golf with Lowell Klein. Avery was a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and a desk that was completely clear of paper. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. She looked at the binder. She looked at the receipt from the Ember Room. Then she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "You want to sue them?" she asked. "I want my money back," I said. Avery sighed. She leaned forward, clasping her hands on the polished wood of the desk. "Sarah, I am going to be honest with you because that is what you are paying me for. You can sue them. You have evidence that they misrepresented the purpose of the funds. We call that fraud in the inducement. But litigation is expensive, it is public, and in family cases, it is messy. Unless you have a written contract stating these were loans, the court will likely view them as gifts. They lied about what the money was for." I said, "People lie to family members all the time." Avery said, "It is immoral, but it is not always actionable in a way that makes financial sense. If you spend $20,000 on legal fees to recover $40,000 that they probably do not have in liquid cash, you have lost. So I just walk away?" I asked. "I just let them keep it?" "No," she said. "You shift your goal. You stop trying to get a refund on the past. And you focus on protecting your future. You mentioned a threat from a woman named Marion Klein?" "Yes." I said. "She left me a voicemail warning me about defamation." "That is the real danger," Avery said. "These people, this circle, they protect their own. If you start making public accusations about fraud, they will not sue you for the money. They will sue you for damaging their reputation. They have deeper pockets than you. They can bury you in paperwork for years." I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. "So they win," I said. "Not if we are smart," Avery said. "We do not fight a war of noise. We fight a war of silence. You want a clean break. You want them to stop asking, and you want to ensure they never use your name again to bolster their credit or their social standing." She opened her laptop. "We are going to draft a settlement agreement," she said. "It will not be filed in court unless necessary. It is a private contract. It will state that you are ceasing all financial support effective immediately. It will outline a repayment plan for the most recent transfers, the ones where we have the clearest proof of deception, like the medical bill, and it will include a non-disparagement clause." "Non-disparagement?" I asked. "It goes both ways," she said. "You agree not to blast them on social media. They agree not to spread rumors that you are unstable or cruel. And most importantly, they agree to remove your name from all circle materials, past and present. If they violate it, they owe you liquidated damages." It felt transactional. It felt cold. But as I looked at Avery, I realized that was exactly what I needed. I didn't need a hug. I needed a contract. We drafted the document. I sent it via certified mail. I waited 3 days. On the 4th day, a courier arrived at my office. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a spreadsheet, when the receptionist called me to the front. There was a thick envelope. The return address was a law firm in Briar Glen. I took it back to my desk. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to be steady. I slit the envelope open. Inside was a letter and a document for me to sign. The letter was polite, written in the dense, suffocating language of corporate law. It stated that my parents, Howard and Elaine Collins, were deeply saddened by the misunderstandings regarding the financial assistance I had provided. It claimed that they had always viewed our relationship as one of mutual support and love. Then I read the document they wanted me to sign. It was titled Affidavit of Gift and Voluntary Support. It read, I, Sarah Collins, hereby attest that all funds transferred to Howard and Elaine Collins between the years of 2015 and 2023 were voluntary gifts. Given with no expectation of repayment, I acknowledge that I provided these funds out of love and affection, and I fully understood they were for the general support of the household. I retract any prior assertions that these funds were obtained through deception. I stared at the paper. They didn't want a truce. They wanted an eraser. If I signed this, I could never sue them. I could never claim fraud. But more than that, I would be signing a lie. I would be agreeing that I had been a willing participant in their scheme. And there was a second clause. In exchange for the execution of this affidavit, Howard and Elaine Collins agree to forgive the emotional distress caused by Sarah Collins's recent unfounded accusations. Forgive me. They were offering to forgive me for catching them. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that made the intern in the next cubicle look up in alarm. They were terrified. They wouldn't have sent this if they weren't scared. They needed this paper. Why? I called Avery. They are trying to refinance again, Avery said, her voice crackling over the speakerphone. Or they are trying to secure a new loan. If they have a large influx of cash from a daughter that suddenly stops, a lender might ask questions. Or, if the circle found out there is a dispute, they might be asking for proof of solvency. They need you to certify that the money was a gift, so it counts as income or assets, not a liability. They want me to whitewash history. I said, do not sign it. Avery said, obviously, I am not going to sign it. I said, I am going to burn it. Do not burn it, Avery said. Keep it. It is evidence of their state of mind. It proves they are trying to coerce you into changing the narrative. I hung up. I looked at the affidavit. They were trying to seal the cracks in their facade. But the cracks were getting too big. I needed to see the facade one last time. Tessa came over that night. We ordered Thai food and sat on my living room floor with the binder between us. You are not going to sign this, Tessa said, flicking the affidavit. No, I said, but I need to understand what they are protecting. This isn't just about the bank. It is about the social standing. They are scared the Kleins will find out. The Kleins already know something, Tessa said. That is why Marion left you that voicemail. They are circling the wagons. Tessa opened her laptop. I found something, she said. I was looking at the Circle's upcoming events calendar. Look at this. She turned the screen toward me. It was a flyer for the Circle of Light Gala, scheduled for this coming Saturday at the Lake Haven Convention Center. It was their biggest event of the year. The text at the bottom read, Honoring our community guardians, the families who have given tirelessly to the Briar Glen vision, and there, listed in the second row of honorees, were Howard and Elaine Collins. They are getting an award. I said, they are getting a public validation of their fraud. Tessa corrected, they are going to walk up on stage, accept a plaque, and have their picture taken as pillars of the community, and they funded that award with your money. I looked at the date. Saturday. I am going. I said, Sarah, no. Tessa said, that is a bad idea. It will be a scene. I am not going to make a scene. I said, I am going to be a witness, and I'm going to collect the final piece of evidence. What evidence? The program. I said, I want the printed program with their names on it. I want the photo of them on stage, and I want to record the speech. If they say they donated money that I gave them, I will have it on video. Tessa looked at me. She saw the set of my jaw. Okay, she said, but I am coming with you, and we are staying near the exit. Saturday night arrived with a bitter wind coming off the lake. The convention center was lit up with spotlights. Valets were running back and forth, parking Bentleys and Mercedes. I did not have a ticket, but the event was in the main ballroom, and the lobby was open to the public. The doors to the ballroom would be open for the procession. I wore a dark navy dress, high neck, long sleeves. I didn't want to look like I was partying, I wanted to look like a funeral director. We stood in the back of the ballroom, behind the velvet ropes that separated the seated guests from the press and the staff. The room was bathed in amber light. There were crystal centerpieces on every table. I scanned the room. I saw them. Table 4, near the front. My parents were sitting there. My father was in a tuxedo. My mother was wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the lights. She looked regal. She was laughing at something the man next to her said. They looked happy. It was the happiness that hurt the most. They weren't suffering. They weren't losing sleep over the daughter they had alienated. They were drinking champagne and basking in the adoration of strangers. The ceremony began. The MC, a local news anchor with perfect teeth, took the stage. Tonight, we honor the heartbeat of our organization, he said. The families who give not just their treasure, but their time. He started reading names. People clapped. Then, Howard and Elaine Collins. My parents stood up. The spotlight hit them. The applause was loud, genuine. I took out my phone. I hit record. They walked to the stage. My father took the microphone. "Thank you," he said. His voice was thick with emotion, the fake emotion I knew so well. We are just humble servants of this community. We believe that if you have been blessed, you have a duty to build a longer table, not a higher fence. I felt bile rise in my throat. Blessed. He was talking about my salary. He was talking about the overtime I worked. He was talking about the vacations I canceled. We could not do this without the support of our friends, my mother added, leaning into the mic, and our family. We do this for the next generation. For me. They were dedicating their theft to me. I zoomed in on the video. I wanted to capture their faces, the absolute lack of shame. Suddenly, a hand touched my elbow. I turned. A young man with a headset was standing there. He looked nervous. "Ma'am," he said, "do you have a ticket for the dinner?" "I am just watching the ceremony," I said. "I am sorry, but this is a private event," he said. "We have been asked to keep the standing area clear." "Asked by whom?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder. Near the side entrance, I saw a security guard watching us. "Please," the young man said. "We do not want any trouble." I looked back at the stage. My parents were shaking hands with the circle president. They were holding a crystal trophy. "I have what I need," I said. I turned to leave. Tessa was already holding the door open, but as we walked into the lobby, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the coat check. It was Gwen Lark. She was wearing a red dress that looked like a wound. She smiled, but her eyes were dead. "Sarah," she said, "I had a feeling you might show up." "Hello." "Gwen," I said. I kept walking. She stepped in front of me. She wasn't aggressive, just solid. An obstacle. "Can we have a quick chat?" she asked. "Just for a minute. Girl to girl." I looked at Tessa. Tessa nodded and stepped back a few feet, pulling out her phone to record audio, though she kept it low. "What do you want?" "Gwen?" I asked. "I heard about the legal noise," Gwen said. "The letters, the affidavit. It is all very intense. It is necessary." I said, "Is it?" Gwen tilted her head. "Look, Sarah, I know you feel wronged. Families are complicated. Money makes people weird. But you are a smart woman. You have a career. I did have a career." I said, "Until you fired me." Gwen waved a hand airily. "That was business." She said, "It wasn't personal. And honestly, I might have been wrong. I have been watching you. You have grit." She stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Here's the thing, Sarah. The circle has a lot of reach. We know people. I know people. There is a director of operations role opening up at the Klein Group. It pays double what you are making now. Company car, equity." She paused. "I could make a call," she said. "I could ensure your resume goes to the top of the pile. You would be perfect for it." I stared at her. She was offering me a job. She was offering me a bribe. And the unspoken condition? Drop the dispute, sign the affidavit, disappear. "So that is how it works," I said. "You buy my silence with a promotion? I am offering you an opportunity." Gwen said. You can keep fighting your parents, dragging this out, embarrassing everyone, and ending up with nothing but legal bills. Or you can be smart. You can take the win. You can be successful. I looked at her perfectly lined lips. I realized then that my parents weren't the only ones who saw me as a commodity. To Gwen, to the circle, I was just a problem to be solved with a budget line item. You are right. I said, I am smart. Gwen smiled. Good. I knew you were smart enough to know that if I take that job, I own nothing. I said, I become one of you. I become someone who can be bought. Gwen's smile faltered. I don't want your job, Gwen. I said, and I don't want your help. I want the truth. Gwen stared at me for a long moment. The warmth evaporated from her face. The mask slipped, revealing the cold, calculating machinery underneath. You are making a mistake, she said. Her voice was flat. You are a small person. Sarah, you are trying to topple a very large structure. You are not as important as you think you are. Nobody cares where the money came from. They only care that the party stays lit. Then I will turn off the lights, I said. I walked past her. I didn't look back. I drove home in silence. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull ache in my bones. My phone rang at 11 o'clock. It was my father. I stared at the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I knew this was the end game. I swiped green. I put it on speaker. I sat at my kitchen table, the darkness of the room pressing in. Hello, Dad. You humiliated us, he said. His voice was low, trembling with a suppressed rage that was far scarier than his shouting. I didn't do anything. I said, I stood in the back of a room. We saw you, he said. We saw you filming, like some kind of spy. After everything we have done for you, everything you have done? I asked. We gave you life. Sarah, he shouted, the control slipping. We raised you. We fed you. We drove you to soccer practice. We paid for your braces. We sacrificed our own happiness so you could have a future. I waited. I let his words hang in the air. And now you think you can audit us? He continued. You think you can send us a bill? You owe us. Sarah, you owe us everything. It is the duty of a child to support the family. It is the price of being a Collins. I took a deep breath. I looked at the binder on the table, the receipt, the lies. Dad, I said softly. What? He snapped. You don't get to invoice me for my childhood. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. I didn't choose to be born. I said, you chose to have me. Feeding me and clothing me was not a loan. It was your job. You cannot charge me interest on my existence, Sarah. No, I said, I am done. I am not your retirement plan. I am not your bank. And I am certainly not your sponsor. I hung up. I blocked the number. I sat there for a long time. I felt like I had just cut off a limb. It hurt. It was a phantom pain that I knew would last for years. But the rot was gone. I looked at the program I had grabbed from the table near the door as we left the gala. I flipped through the glossy pages. I looked for their names one last time. I found the seating chart near the back. It listed the table sponsors. Table 1, the Klein family. Table 2, Prentice Row Realty. Table 3, Hearthstone Advisory Group. I looked at Table 4, my parents' table. It didn't say the Collins family. It said Collins, sponsor. I stared at the word sponsor. In the circle, there were members and there were sponsors. Members paid dues. Sponsors paid more. Sponsors covered the overhead for the event. My parents were paying a premium to sit at that table. And then I saw the asterisk next to the word sponsor. I looked at the key at the bottom of the page. Sponsor status requires a recurring monthly charitable commitment to the General Operating Fund. Recurring, monthly. I pulled the Ember Room receipt from the binder. I looked at the note again. Same time next month. Your table is perfect. The Ember Room reservation wasn't just dinner. It was the monthly meeting where they delivered the check. The dinner was the perk for the donation. They weren't just eating my money. They were handing it over in a monthly ritual to buy the label sponsor on a seating chart. They had monetized my guilt to buy an adjective. I closed the program. I had everything I needed. I was not going to sue them. Avery was right. A lawsuit was messy. I was going to do something cleaner. I took a large manila envelope. I put the copy of the Ember Room receipt inside. I put the spreadsheet of the transfers inside. I put the screenshot of the gold-level pledge inside. I put the copy of the affidavit of gift they had sent me inside, unsigned, and I put a copy of the gala program. With Collins, sponsor circled in red marker, I sat down and wrote one final letter. It wasn't an emotional plea. It was a set of instructions. To Howard and Elaine Collins. Enclosed is the documentation of the last 8 years. I have copies. My attorney has copies. I am willing to keep these copies private. I am willing to forego the lawsuit for the return of the $48,000. But here is the cost. I wrote down the terms. They were simple. They were brutal. They were non-negotiable. I sealed the envelope. I picked up my phone and sent one text to my mother's email address, since I had blocked her number. Meet me at the Lake Haven Public Commons tomorrow at noon, Room B. Bring the Kleins if you want. Bring a lawyer, but bring your checkbook. I turned off the light. Tomorrow. The story ended. Tomorrow. I stopped being a character in their fiction. The Lake Haven Public Commons was a building designed to make difficult things feel manageable. It smelled of floor wax and old paper. The walls were a neutral oatmeal color, and the lighting was fluorescent but dim, creating an atmosphere of bureaucratic calm. I had reserved Room B. It was a small conference room with a round table and 4 chairs. It was public enough that they wouldn't make a scene, but private enough that we could speak the truth without the neighbors overhearing. I arrived 20 minutes early. I placed the 2 manila envelopes on the table. One contained the settlement agreement, a repayment plan for the last 6 months of transfers, a cease and desist on asking for money, and a mutual non-disparagement clause. The other contained the evidence, the bank statements, the receipt from the Ember Room, the property records of the vacant lot in Briar Glen, and the copy of the gala program with Collins, sponsor circled in red. I sat with my back to the window. I wanted to see them come in. I wanted to see their faces before they had time to arrange their masks. At noon exactly, the door opened. They walked in together. My father was wearing a soft beige cardigan that made him look like a kindly grandfather. My mother was wearing a floral scarf and carrying a Tupperware container. "Sarah," my mother said, her voice pitching up into that bright, brittle register she used when she was nervous. "Oh, it is so good to see you. I brought you some of that lasagna you like. I know you have been working so hard." She reached for me. Her arms were open, her face arranged in a look of forgiving love. She was playing the scene where the prodigal daughter returns and the mother welcomes her home with open arms. I stepped back. I put the back of my legs against the heavy conference table. "Do not," I said. My mother stopped. Her arms dropped slowly. The hurt that flashed across her face was practiced. But the confusion behind it was real. She didn't understand why the script wasn't working. My father closed the door. He gave me a tight, pained smile. "Let's not be dramatic. Sarah," he said, "your mother has been worried sick. We just want to talk. We want to clear the air." "Sit down," I said. I didn't offer them water. I didn't ask about their drive. I sat in my chair and waited until they pulled out the seats opposite me. They looked small in the room. Without the backdrop of their house, without the props of their poverty, they looked like what they were. 2 aging people who had leveraged their future on a lie. I put my hand on the stack of documents. "I am not here to argue," I said. "I am not here to listen to stories about car repairs or medical bills. I have done the math." My father sighed. He laced his fingers together on the table. "Sarah, we know you are upset about the money," he said. "We should have been clearer. We admit that. But you have to understand, finances are complicated. When you are retired, cash flow is tricky." I looked him in the eye. "Were you ever actually broke?" I asked. The question hung in the air. The fluorescent light hummed. My father blinked. He looked at my mother, then back at me. "Broke is a relative term," he said. "It is a yes or no question." Dad, were you ever in danger of losing the house? Were you ever unable to buy food? Were you ever at risk of having the lights turned off? He shifted in his chair. He looked annoyed, like a teacher dealing with a slow student. We were tight, he said. We were very tight. The market fluctuates. We had assets, yes, but they were illiquid. We couldn't just sell everything the moment a bill came in. Your help kept us from sliding. It kept us stable. Stable, I repeated. I opened the second envelope. I pulled out the gala program. I flipped it to the back page. I slid it across the table. I pointed to the line. Collins, sponsor. I pointed to the footnote. Recurring monthly charitable commitment. Is this what you mean by tight? I asked. My father looked at the program. His face went gray. He didn't touch it. My mother made a small, choking sound. She reached out and covered the paper with her hand, as if hiding it would make it untrue. That is different, she whispered. How is it different? I asked. My voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor in my hands beneath the table. You told me you needed $300 for transmission fluid. You told me you needed $200 for a dentist copay. And every single month, on the 14th, a payment of $500 went to the Briar Glen Circle. It was an investment, my father snapped. The anger was breaking through the grandfather act. You do not understand how the world works. Sarah, you have to be in the room. You have to be at the table. If we stopped paying the dues, we would lose our standing. We would lose the connections. What connections? I asked. The connections that allow you to buy more land you cannot afford? The connections that allow you to pretend you are wealthy while your daughter pays your electric bill? My mother started to cry. It wasn't the pretty, silent weeping she did on the phone. It was a messy, gasping sob. We just wanted to be someone, she cried. She looked at me, her eyes red and desperate. You do not know what it is like, Sarah, to be invisible, to be just, average. The circle made us feel like we mattered. People looked at us with respect. When we walked into the Ember Room, they knew our names. I looked at her. I saw the tragedy of it. She was an addict. She wasn't addicted to drugs or alcohol. She was addicted to validation. She was addicted to the feeling of being a silver benefactor, and like any addict, she would burn down her own house to get the fix. But she hadn't burned down her house. She had burned down mine. I understand. Mom, I said, I really do. You wanted to feel special. Yes, she sobbed. Is that a crime? No, I said, but making me pay for it is. I slid the settlement agreement across the table. This is the end. I said, I am cutting you off. No more transfers. No more bills. No more emergency loans. I have drafted a repayment plan for the medical bills you faked. It is 10% of the total. It is generous. My father stared at the document. He didn't pick it up. And if we do not sign? He asked. His voice was hard. Then I file a lawsuit for fraud. I said, and I subpoena the circle's financial records to prove where my money went. My father laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. This is blackmail. He said, you are blackmailing your own parents. It is boundaries. Dad, I said. He stood up. He picked up the agreement and tore it in half. The sound of the paper ripping was loud in the small room. We are not signing this, he said, and you are not going to sue us. You do not have the stomach for it. You are weak. Sarah, you always have been. You just want everyone to like you. You will not drag our name through the mud because it would dirty yours too. I looked at the torn paper on the table. I expected this. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second copy. I didn't slide it over. I just left it there. Then the door opened. I hadn't heard a knock. I turned. Marion Klein walked in. She was wearing a cream-colored wool coat and carrying a leather handbag that cost more than my car. She looked perfectly out of place in the public library conference room, like a diamond sitting in a gravel driveway. My parents didn't look surprised. They looked relieved. Marion. My mother breathed. Thank God. I stood up. What is she doing here? I asked. Marion smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. Hello? Sarah, she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured. Elaine asked me to come. She was worried that you were feeling overwhelmed. I thought perhaps a neutral friend could help facilitate. She isn't a friend. I said, she is the head of the organization that took my money. Marion walked to the table. She didn't sit. She stood behind my parents, placing a manicured hand on my mother's shoulder. My mother leaned into the touch like a child. Sarah, Marion said, her tone dropping to a serious, confidential register. We are all adults here. I have seen the emails you have been sending. I have heard about the accusations. I have to tell you, as someone who cares about your future, you are walking a very dangerous line. Is that a threat? I asked. It is advice, she said. The circle is a family. We protect our members. If you persist in this crusade, people will talk. Your employer will hear things. Your clients will hear things. Reputation is a fragile thing. Sarah, once it is cracked, it is very hard to fix. I looked at them. The tableau was perfect. My parents, the victims, sheltering under the wing of the powerful matriarch. They had brought the heavy artillery. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would be the scared little girl who just wanted to be good. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the woman who had spent 8 years buying their lies. I had the receipt. I looked at Marion. You are right. Marion, I said, reputation is everything. I picked up the last document from my stack. It wasn't the settlement agreement. It was a formal legal notice I had drafted with Avery. I walked around the table. I didn't hand it to my father. I handed it to Marion. What is this? She asked, frowning. It is a notice of non-consent regarding the use of my name and identity. I said. Marion looked at the paper. I am not asking for the money back. I said, you can keep it. Consider it the price of my education. I looked at my parents. I am not suing you. I said, I am not going to expose you. I am not going to write a blog post or call the newspaper. My father's shoulders relaxed slightly. He thought he had won. He thought the threat had worked, but, I continued, my voice hardening, I am removing myself from your narrative. I pointed to the paper in Marion's hand. That notice states that neither Howard nor Elaine Collins, nor the Briar Glen Circle, has permission to use my name, my likeness, or my financial history in any public or private pledges, sponsorships, or promotional materials. I looked at my father. You cannot claim to be a Collins family sponsor if the Collins family does not exist. You cannot accept awards on behalf of our children if your child has formally disavowed you. Marion looked up from the paper. Her eyes were cold. This is ridiculous, she said. You cannot dictate what they say. Actually, I can. I said, if you use my name to solicit donations, or to bolster your creditworthiness, or to gain social standing, and I have explicitly forbidden it. That is fraud, and if the circle knowingly allows it, the circle is liable. I leaned in close to Marion. My attorney is very excited to test the liability of a non-profit organization that facilitates identity theft for its members. I whispered. Marion's face didn't move, but her eyes flickered. She did the math. She calculated the risk. Sarah, she said, her voice tight, you are making a mistake. No, I said, I am fixing one. I turned to my parents. My mother was staring at me with a look of absolute horror. Not because I was leaving, but because I was taking the prop away. I was taking the good daughter character off the stage. You are abandoning us. She whispered. No, Mom, I said, I am freeing you. You do not have to pretend to be perfect for me anymore, and you do not have to pretend to be rich for them. I picked up my purse. I walked to the door. My father stood up. His face was red, his veins bulging in his neck. You walk out that door, Sarah, and you are dead to us, he shouted. The veneer of the kindly old man was gone completely. You hear me? You are nothing without us. We made you. I stopped. I put my hand on the doorknob. I turned back one last time. I looked at the three of them, the desperate social climbers and the woman who held their leash. I realized then that I didn't hate them. I pitied them. They were trapped in a prison of their own making, a prison with velvet ropes and gold-plated bars. "You didn't make me, Dad," I said quietly. "You just build me." I opened the door and walked out. I walked down the long hallway of the Commons. I heard the door of Room B open behind me. I heard my father's voice rising, shouting my name. I didn't run. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my heels clicking on the linoleum, a steady, rhythmic sound. When I got to my car, I sat in the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I gripped the steering wheel and breathed. In, out, in, out. I waited for the tears. I waited for the crushing guilt, but it didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange, light sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy weight being lifted. The stone was gone. I drove home. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. It was cold, but I didn't mind. I had a notification on my phone. It was from Tessa. She had sent me a screenshot. It was from the digital program for the Circle's upcoming spring gala. The event was tonight. The program had been updated an hour ago. She had highlighted the list of sponsors. Table 4. It no longer said Collins, sponsor. It said Friends of the Circle, and in the list of silver benefactors, my parents' names were gone. Marion had acted fast. She had scrubbed the liability. She had erased me, but by erasing me, she had erased them, without my money. Without my name to anchor their legacy, they were just two people at a table, anonymous and unremarkable. They had threatened to cut me off. But I had cut the line first. I sipped my wine. I looked out at the lights of Lake Haven. I was $48,000 poorer than I should have been. I had lost my parents. I had lost the illusion of a happy family. But for the first time in 8 years, the money in my bank account was mine. The silence in my phone was mine. And the story was mine. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the sponsor. I was free. Thank you for listening to Sarah's story. It is a hard truth that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the ones we need protection from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Sarah's decision. Did she do the right thing by walking away? Or was there another path? Please leave a comment below telling me where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, betrayal, and the messy reality of human relationships, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your boundaries strong.